outrage after high school officials in Northern California ordered students to turn their American flag T-shirts inside out for a Cinco de Mayo celebration. The school feared that by wearing the American flag during Cinco de Mayo, non-Mexican students would spark racial tensions, so they banned the American flag from sight. Now, the school was sued, and now a federal appeals court has approved the school's decision, saying that the flag's ban didn't violate anyone's constitutional rights, citing a history of issues between white and Latino students on Cinco de Mayo. One of the judges said, quote, "Our role is not to second-guess the decision to have a Cinco de Mayo celebration or the precautions put in place to avoid violence."
All right, folks, welcome back. That's a crazy, sick, demented, twisted, unfortunate situation, which we'll talk about eventually with our next guest, the great Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor, and of course he helped put the Blind Sheikh behind bars, New York Times best-selling author. His latest, Faithless Execution, Building the Political Case for Obama's Impeachment, and of course columnist and senior fellow at the National Review. There's the book up on the screen. Hello, Andy.
Hey, Steve, how are you?
I'm doing well. Appreciate you coming on. I know you didn't see the Goodell press conference, but what's your take on not everything Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson, but what's your take on the frenzy, the attacks on Goodell, and he needed to resign, and he's encouraging violence against women? I mean, I never understood exactly how the focus is on him in the Rice case, for instance, and not on those prosecutors in Jersey who let Ray Rice walk after seeing the punch in the elevator.
Yeah, well, Steve, I think there's a lot of, and you know this probably better than I do because you're more in that world than I am, but I think there's a lot of sports journalists who lean to the left even more hard and outright than their colleagues on the political beat. And a lot of them have had it in for the NFL for a long time. And, you know, they're making all kinds of moves to try to change the game and change the way it's played. And they've turned this into a football thing, when I think, in point of fact, if you look at it objectively, it's more of a society thing that is reflected in football. And if you want to be honest about it, reflected in football to a degree far less than it's reflected in the broader society. So I think Goodell is in the crosshairs because, let's face it, he totally mishandled the Rice situation. I mean, he started out doing the 2-game suspension. And look, it's fair enough to say that the prosecutors gave Rice an easy deal, although I have to say that as a former prosecutor, Rice's case would have been looked at against the backdrop of all domestic abuse cases of that kind, not just like cases that are notorious and arise out of the NFL because it's a celebrity. And the fact of the matter is, you know, he's a first offender. The victim ended up marrying him and strongly supports him. He's got a fairly strong record of doing charitable work. I'm not cheerleading for the guy. I'm just saying how a prosecutor.
No, I understand. I understand. Yeah.
And I think the NFL and the team he plays for, the Ravens, have a right to say and should say that we have higher standards than merely whether you can avoid prosecution or not. We want people to conduct themselves in a particular way. They could have hammered him. I don't think anybody would have had any heartburn if they did. But the way Goodell did it, first it was 2 games, which looked like a slap on the wrist. Then he comes in and says, gee, we mishandled this. We're going to make a new standard. The problem was we didn't have standards before. Now we've got standards. If this kind of thing happens again, it's 6 games. And then the tape came out, which I think the tape came out a day that you and I were actually talking. And one of the things that we noted about it was it didn't advance anybody's knowledge of what actually happened that night. Everything was known.
Right.
The only difference was we now had a graphic picture of it. And then Goodell says, all right, indefinite suspension. So, you know, he has not done a good job in terms of consistency, how they're gonna deal with these things. I can understand the football players being upset, the union being upset, the public being upset. But really what's gone on the last week, especially with the commentary by the sports journalist left and people like Kate Fagan at ESPN, is trying to use this to conduct their social engineering. So it's kind of like
Yep.
you know, they want to use the NFL the way community organizers on the left shake down big corporations. They want the NFL to pay millions of dollars into a big fund, which is going to get sprinkled around to quote unquote community activist organizations, and then they're going to run into the schools and, as Ms. Fagan put it, reprogram the way we raise men. So now it's not a football thing anymore. It becomes another of the left's social engineering exercises. And I'm glad to see from the polls today that most of the public is yawning at it.
Yep, absolutely. Well over 86%. Couldn't care less. All right, good analysis, great analysis on that. I wanted to start with that because it's breaking as we speak. But let's talk about, you wrote two marvelous columns at National Review Online, and the most recent of which is about Obama's go-to moderate Islamist, as you call him. But let's put both, for time purposes, let's put them both in the same conversation here. And the other column was in search of the moderate Islamists in general, so to speak. So talk about, are there moderate Islamists who are going to help us in this fight against ISIS when it comes to, nation states? Are there moderate Islamists enough to make a difference in the world, calling ISIS what they, out for what they are? And talk a little bit about Mohammed al-Bayari, who Obama seems to have a very, a fascination with.
Well, Steve, first of all, there's no such thing as a moderate Islamist. It's a contradiction in terms, but I think because most people don't know what an Islamist is, they figure it's just another way of saying moderate Muslim. And we all know there are millions and millions of moderate Muslims. But an Islamist, to be clear, is a Muslim who wants to impose Sharia. That's what it's really about. Sharia is Islam's societal system and its code of law. And if you want to impose repressive Sharia, you are not a moderate just because you're not willing to blow up a bridge today to accomplish that. So, this whole idea of there being moderate Islamists is something I think the left has come up with, this term, another one of their dizzying terms, to avoid saying what would be obviously offensive to the public, which is that they want to work with the Muslim Brotherhood. But if they said Muslim Brotherhood, that would upset people. So they say they want to work with moderate Islamists, and that's what they want you to think the Brotherhood is. But there are no moderate Islamists. And the problem you have in Syria is there are so few moderates. I'm not saying that there aren't moderates. I'm not saying there aren't pro-Western people. But look what Obama wants to do. He wants to take 5,000 of the Free Syrian Army. Free Syrian Army, by the way, many of them are Islamists. Many of them have cooperated with al-Qaeda and actually fought with the Islamic State in the past. He wants to train 5,000 of them, bring them back in 8 to 12 months, at which point the Islamic State will have an army of about 50,000. They'll be utterly incapable of taking on the Islamic State. They'll be incapable of taking on the Assad regime. So we will just have spent 500 million taxpayer dollars to give military training to at least some more Islamists that could later, somewhere down the road, be turned on the United States.
And providing them with weapons Andy, that since they will not be able to wage battle successfully against ISIS will then get those weapons as well.
Right, and the reason that this happens, Steve, to go back to your original question, is because Obama's advisors in government and the people that he leans on and his predilections are pro-Islamist. And case in point is this fella, Mohammed al-Bayari, who now apparently will not be renominated to his position on a key Department of Homeland Security advisory board after he's been caught engaging in a pretty fiery Islamist rhetoric and potentially, at least, using his position on this board to gain sensitive law enforcement information that he allegedly leaked in order to try to manufacture an Islamophobia claim against the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, as I understand it. So, that's Obama. Those are the people that Obama wants to change the way we do counterterrorism, and instead of having the police do intelligence and preventive work, have them partner with Islamic partners or Islamic groups in the community And these Islamic groups tend to be either pro-Islamist or, outright tied to the Muslim Brotherhood.
It is. I never would have imagined that he would be so blatant in his approach and in his mission and what he hopes to accomplish. Because if only we had a fair media, Andy, if only the rest of the media would tell Americans what you are telling us right now and what I try to tell and others like me try to tell. But he makes no bones about it. Even arming the Syrian rebels, quote unquote, he knows who he's arming. He knows what's going to happen. He can't be that stupid.
Well, Steve, there's a real belief on the left that what they call moderate Islamists are somehow different from Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, and they're really the key to stability in the Middle East, which is in turn the key to American national security. I think it's a crazy notion, but the blunt fact is these people are all united by a single ideology, even though they have tactical and strategic differences. But if people knew that the people Obama wants to cooperate with have, in essence, the same ideology as the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, they just differ on tactics, it would be politically intolerable for that kind of a partnership to happen. So we get things like moderate Islamist, and they hope, you want to examine what it means.
All right, Andy, enjoy your weekend, sir. Thank you very much. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, Steve. Take care.
You too. Andy McCarthy, ladies and gentlemen. All right. When we come back, we're going to have yet another Malzberg panel. Actually, we did. We did have the first panel. We didn't have one of the other panels, or there would have been three. But number 2's coming up. Don't go away.